Some people abuse their position so consistently, so casually, so completely without shame, that they stop even noticing they are doing it. It becomes routine for them, a habit, something they do every single day without thinking twice because nobody has ever made them stop. My HOA president was exactly that kind of person. Every single morning she parked her SUV directly in front of my farm gate. Every single morning I could not get my equipment out. Every single morning she smiled and walked away like it was the most normal thing in the world. Till the morning she came back to her SUV and found it surrounded by a moat. Let me take you back to where this whole thing started. I own a small working farm on the edge of a residential neighborhood. It is not a massive operation, but it is real functioning land that requires daily access through a main gate at the front of the property. Tractors, equipment, feed deliveries, all of it comes in and goes out through that gate every single morning without exception. The gate sits at the end of a shared access road that connects my property to the main street. It is my gate, my land, my access point, and it has existed long before the neighborhood around it was ever developed. When the HOA was formed several years ago, I did not pay much attention to it. My property had certain protections as agricultural land, and I had very little reason to interact with the association on a regular basis. Most of the board members over the years had been reasonable enough people and things had never escalated into anything serious. Then Patricia became HOA president. Patricia was the kind of person who had discovered relatively late in life that having a title made people listened to her, and she had decided to make the absolute most of that discovery. She reorganized meeting schedules, rewrote community guidelines, sent notices to homeowners about things that had never been considered issues before, and generally made it her mission to ensure that everyone within the reach of the HOA understood that she was in charge. For the first few months, I stayed completely out of her way. I had a farm to run and no interest in neighborhood politics. But then the parking started. Patricia drove a large silver SUV, and for reasons I could not immediately explain, she began parking it directly in front of my farm gate in the mornings. Not beside it, not near it, directly in front of it, blocking it completely. I first noticed it on a Monday morning, when I went to move my tractor out, and found her vehicle sitting squarely across the entrance. I looked around, saw no one, and called the number I had for the HOA office. No answer. I waited 30 minutes and then had to reorganize my entire morning schedule because I could not get my equipment out. I assumed it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. The next morning, the SUV was there again, and the morning after that. By the end of the first week, it had happened 5 days in a row. Same vehicle, same spot, same complete blockage of my only equipment access point. I finally caught Patricia herself walking away from the vehicle one morning, and I called out to her. I introduced myself properly, explained that I was the farm owner, and that the gate she was parking in front of was my primary access point for daily farm operations, and asked her politely if she could park somewhere else. She looked at me with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was not quite not a smile either. She told me the road was a shared access road, and that she was perfectly within her rights to park there. Then she turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment, then went back inside and looked carefully at every document I had related to the shared access road. She was technically not wrong that it was a shared road, but there were specific provisions in the original property agreement that prohibited blocking access points to adjacent properties. My gate was clearly an access point. Her parking directly in front of it was clearly a blockage. I sent her a formal written notice citing the specific provision. I kept a copy for myself. I explained clearly that blocking my farm gate was a violation of the access road agreement and asked her to cease immediately. The next morning, her SUV was parked in front of my gate again. I sent a second notice. This one was more detailed. I outlined the specific language of the agreement, the dates and times the blockage had occurred, and I stated clearly that if this continued, I would be forced to take action. The morning after that, same spot, same SUV, and this time she was standing nearby when I came out. She looked at me, gave me that almost smile again, and walked away without a word. That was the last morning she got to walk away from that situation feeling comfortable. That evening, I sat down and thought through everything carefully. I had sent formal notices, spoken to her directly, documented every single instance with photographs and timestamps. She had responded by continuing to park there with what felt like deliberate enjoyment. She believed there was nothing I could do about it. She was about to find out how wrong that was. I called my property attorney. He confirmed that the access road agreement clearly prohibited blocking adjacent property access points, and that I had full legal grounds to pursue action. But he also reminded me of something far more immediately useful. As a working farm owner, I had agricultural land rights giving me considerable latitude in how I managed and modified my own property surrounding the gate. As long as everything stayed within my property lines, I asked him one specific question: whether I had the right to dig on my own property surrounding the gate for legitimate drainage purposes. He told me, absolutely yes. I made 2 calls that night, one to a contractor I had worked with before. He laughed for 30 seconds straight and said he could be there before sunrise. The second call was to check the weather. Clear skies all week, perfect. The contractor arrived early. We worked quietly and efficiently. By full morning light, we had dug a clean, precise channel wrapping around 3 sides of the area directly in front of my gate, entirely within my property lines. We filled it with water from the farm irrigation system, not deep enough to be dangerous, but absolutely deep enough to make it impossible for any vehicle parked there to drive out without going straight through water and getting completely stuck. Then, I went inside and had breakfast. Patricia arrived at her usual time, parked in the exact same spot, got out, glanced at the gate the way she always did, and walked off feeling completely satisfied with herself. Moved my tractor through the gate without any issue and ran my entire morning farm operation exactly as it was always. Supposed to run. A few hours later, I heard it. An engine revving, then revving harder, then stopping. I looked out and saw Patricia standing beside her SUV, staring at the water surrounding 3 sides of her vehicle. She walked around it slowly, looked at her tires, looked at every possible exit route. There was no way out that did not go directly through the moat. 2 HOA board members arrived shortly after. One walked over and asked what was going on. I explained pleasantly that I had begun a drainage improvement project on my property surrounding the gate, entirely within my property lines, fully consistent with my agricultural land rights. I showed him the boundary markers clearly. He looked at the moat. He looked at Patricia's SUV sitting in the middle of it. He looked back at me. I mentioned helpfully that if a vehicle had not been parked there when the project began, there would be no issue accessing it now. I suggested a tow truck with extended reach capability. The tow truck took 2 hours to arrive. Extraction took another 45 minutes. Patricia watched the entire process with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the casual dismissiveness. Not the almost smile. Something that looked very much like a person who had finally understood that the situation they created has consequences they never planned for. Patricia never parked in front of my gate again, not once. The HOA attempted briefly to raise an objection about the drainage project, but when my attorney presented the agricultural land rights, documentation, and confirmed every inch of work was within my property boundaries, the objection disappeared quickly and quietly. I did not dig that moat out of anger. I dug it because I had exhausted every reasonable formal approach and been met with deliberate, repeated disregard. When someone makes it clear they will not respect your rights no matter how properly you assert them, you find the creative, legal, permanent solution that makes the problem impossible to continue. The moat only needed to work once.